Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours with me, Dr Audrey Tang. My co-host is Judith Crosier, and today we are looking at eating outside the 9 to 5. Now, certainly with us in the studio, we eat at all kinds of funny times because you can't always eat at those specific meal times, as we might have guests, we might have recordings, and we work globally, which means that somebody else's 7 a.m. may well be our 2 p.m. and so on. So if this sounds like you, how do you keep yourself healthy? And those aren't the only issues that we might have in the workplace. Shift work, or perhaps if you are a performer and you're dancing at night and then you need to keep your nutrition up, but of course you're finishing at the theatre very late and then you're hungry and the adrenaline's pumping, what do you do? So to help us unpack this very complex and large issue is one of our favourite guests, Dr. Helen McCarthy. She is the appetite doctor. She's a clinical psychologist and she is able to give us the answers that we need and the support for maintaining that healthy weight and healthy nutrition, no matter what our daily jobs. Let's go over to the main studio. Dr. Helen, welcome to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. It's so great to have you back again.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Anytime. You give us so much information. You are a font of knowledge. It's really our privilege to have you here. So today we want to talk about eating well when we don't have set times to eat. And that can be really problematic for a lot of our guests and a lot of people who work outside that 9 to 5. We work outside it on a Friday. We now work outside it on a Wednesday as well. How do you keep up those good nutritional habits when you don't have that set schedule?
Well, I think implied in your question is a really important point, which is that regularity of eating is extremely good for us. It really supports our overall health and well-being. So much so that in Cancer Research UK's top 10 tips, it's called, or 10 top tips for healthy weight, their number one tip is keep to your meal routine. So I think that's behind your question. And if so, that then is really helpful advice. But exactly as you say, if you can't do that, then what do you do? And I think the first thing is to just acknowledge the realistic demands on people mean that very often you get thrown out of the regular routine that you might be aiming for. So if you're realistic about what a day is going to involve, maybe the key thing is if it's just a one-off day, if it's and for you what you're describing now is Wednesdays and Fridays is a bit more like if that's a regular thing where Wednesdays and Fridays both have the same unusual pattern, then you could treat that as right, that's a particular type of schedule I need to account for. But if Wednesday is different from Friday, so each Wednesday, do you see what I mean? It's like,
yes.
Just thinking like that, then probably the most important thing of all is to do a bit of planning and think about what that routine is going to be like on that day. Because if it's, by definition, if it's going to be a busy day, you're going to have relatively little mental bandwidth to do any thinking about food once the day is going. So anything you can do the day before or even further in advance, just to think, right, tomorrow I'm not going to be able to have lunch till late, or I'm not going to get in till late, whatever it is. And then maybe aim to keep anything that you can closer to your usual routine, but don't sweat too much about if it's off usual track, I would say. That's
really helpful. It's the planning side of things which is so important. And if we do have some kind of predictability, I guess that helps. Then you sometimes have a situation where it's sprung upon you, or you forget, or you get up late and you don't do that planning, and so you skip a meal, and then this is talking about me really. I get really hungry, and then I want to just eat a bag of crisps. Not necessarily because I really want the crisps, but because it's fast and it's easy and it's there. I don't have to wait for a hot meal or something like that. How do we kind of manage those moments, or is one moment like that okay?
I think I think you have to recognise that there will be moments like that in most of our lives. There will be moments like that, and it really doesn't matter what you do as a one-off, because one-off things don't influence our health and well-being, apart from real extremes. One-off events or one-off strategies don't affect overall health and well-being, but regular things do. So if it's a one-off thing, then maybe just accept that that's what you do on that occasion or what happens on that occasion. But I think it's really important, this thing about speed and hunger, and that if you get overly hungry as that's when you might be most likely to be grabbing something that you might not find that particularly, it might not even be what you really fancied, but there's a sort of sense of urgency.
Yes.
And a problem with that sort of eating is that when you feel overly hungry, the chances are that you're going to eat more quickly and with a greater sense of urgency. And we know that people who eat faster eat more, so slower eating in and of itself reduces food intake. You don't have to, if you don't change anything else and you slow down your rate of eating, you will eat less. So when you find yourself in a situation where you've got this urgency and you're eating more quickly, you're likely to consume more. That's just worth bearing in mind, I think. And the other thing that happens when you eat with that sense of urgency is you're more likely to be doing the eating with less awareness, and so you're less likely to register your internal fullness signals, so it's much more likely that you'll eat beyond the point of fullness. So it's just to do with the way that our appetite works, and a little bit of knowledge goes a long way with things like just thinking, right, that being able to plan for that sort of situation might help me not get into that overly urgent eating situation. And the most obvious thing to do there is probably to maybe carry a snack with you if there's a possibility of that happening, preferably one with a long shelf life, so you don't have to it doesn't matter if you don't eat it that day, so you don't get into that sense of, oh, I've got it, so I've got to eat it up today.
Yes, you make a lot of sense, and the thing that I've really taken from that bit of advice there is, okay, if I have to grab the bag of crisps, I grab it, but at least eat it mindfully, at least eat it with awareness and some sort of enjoyment, rather than just stuffing my face with it and then grabbing another. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah,
really helpful.
That does make a lot of sense. What about if we've gone all day and then we haven't had a chance to eat dinner because we might have been performing on stage or had a late meeting? So I have a lot of evening meetings, so I either have to have my dinner at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, that's really, those situations I think are really tricky, and and also the way that you solve them, like with anything, I think the way that you solve these situations or resolve them more is likely to differ depending on you as an individual. So you might have a number of people with the same dilemma about 4 o'clock or 10 o'clock who come up with different solutions. But the key things to keep in mind, I think, are that eating late at night tends to affect sleep, which then has knock-on effects for general, obviously, energy and well-being. You don't want to go to bed too hungry, though, because that will affect sleep in a different way. So the thing about eating late at night, if you eat quite a lot late at night, you might fall asleep quite easily on a full stomach, but you're more likely to find that in the early hours, your sleep is then disrupted. So that's one thing to factor in, I think, so that if you have to, if you want and need to have a later night meal, it might be a good idea to have a small meal, like push your main meal times earlier in the day. And something you might find that people might find really helpful is to realize that foods that keep you going for longer don't just keep you, how can I put this, that if you eat foods, particularly, I think, although this is something that is at the edge of my knowledge, because it's sort of straying into dietetic knowledge. But if you eat foods with a higher protein content, even earlier in the day, that affects your appetite regulation in the evening. So if you eat more protein at breakfast or more protein at lunchtime, you may find that the evening, even if you haven't been able to eat at the usual time, you may find that you don't get as thrown off or as, horribly starvingly hungry or whatever, even if you decide to go for the 10 o'clock.
You're not so desperate then, are
No,
you?
that's really interesting then. So protein earlier in the day potentially makes you less hungrier later in the day.
Yes, weirdly. I mean, it
Less
seems
hungry.
like, because we tend to think, and I think we tend to think, understandably, we think of a meal is digested and that keeps us going to the next meal, and then we eat that and then that keeps us going to the next meal. But there are these much longer effects as well, not just over the course of a day, but over our bodies are keeping tabs, if you like, on what we've been eating. So it can really help. It can really help to, because what you really don't want, I think, is late at night to be overly hungry, really tired, because that's another thing that just will make it much harder to focus and think.
Yes.
You're just like eating mindlessly then.
Yeah.
Or most of us would.
Yeah, this is something to definitely, we're going to pause there to let's all digest that information, which has been so helpful.
Yeah.
Dr. Helen is staying with us. We'll be back just after this.
Hey there, I'm Diane Forster, host of I Have Today, where we talk about the art of intentional living. Our show is on the Fresh Takes channel on Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific. So if you're ready to be inspired, empowered, and educated and learn how to live the I Have Today way, then tune in. Hope to see you there.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters, office hours, and we have Dr. Helen with us, and we're talking about what to eat when we don't necessarily have time to eat well. Dr. Helen, so we touched on it before about eating at the times that we wouldn't particularly usually eat. What about if we've got regular shift work? You were saying before that protein might keep us going for longer. Would that then kind of come into, if we're doing shift work, 1 week early shifts, next week late shifts?
It might do. I mean, the composition of food, if people are interested in this, in learning more about things like the effects of protein, the place I would go to is the website of the British Dietetic Association, because they produce fantastic quality information and lots of it. And they have a very good social media presence. But there's a lot to say about the psychology of exactly what you're asking about there, which is about the how to handle this a lifestyle where you've got more than one essential pattern. You've got more than one routine. And what I think is helpful there is as we've said, the regularity is really helpful, but when you have lifestyle demands on you, which mean that that's impossible, what can be really helpful is to actually plan different eating routines depending on the type of day it is. So, for example, a lot of us might have one type of eating routine Monday to Friday and a different eating routine at the weekend. But for some of us, it might be much more complicated than that, because you might have, say, 2 different work shifts that you've got to accommodate with very different timings, or it might be that, say, certain days of the week you're looking after young children and cooking for them and dealing with their meal times, or there could be many, many reasons why you're either cooking for somebody or somebody's cooking for you, or you're fitting into a work pattern. Whatever it is, if it's happening regularly, it's worth creating a plan of a routine so that you've got different routines that you just sort of slot into.
Yeah.
And the principles, I think the principles that I would suggest that you try and aim for are as much consistency as you can between the different types, so that it might be that even if there's a lot of variation, it might be that you are able to say have lunch at, say, somewhere between 12:30 and 1:30, or even 12 till 2. Some people, because it's consistency, it's not about rigidity. Or it might be that breakfast is something that's relatively fixed, even if everything else is then different. But then once you know which sort of day it is, your mind and body are sort of able to move between these different patterns, knowing that it's still a pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like really good
like
advice.
patterns.
Yes, we do. Yeah, I think as human beings, you mean, yes.
Yeah.
And so what about professionals who need to eat certain diets or might be on certain restrictions and need to maintain their weight or lose weight for a specific reason? They're probably likely to be well versed in what they're doing. What if it's something that we want to start? So if we want to start a new
weight trainer, or
exactly, or just lose weight and have a new regime, how do we build the good habits and how do we start?
I think the absolute key is to start where you are now, rather than think that you ought to be doing something different, so try and do that different thing overnight, because it's a massive, that can just be a huge, overly difficult challenge very often. But if you think, right, this is how my eating is at the moment, and however messed up it feels, if you look at the specific eating habits now that are the ones that you're unhappy with, then you can make a list of those. It might be a relatively short list, it might be a relatively long list, but the key is not the length of the list, it's which habit to focus on first. And I've written blogs on this, so you can read those on my website. And the thing that I would sort of point you towards is something called the behaviour change wheel, which is a research-based way of thinking about making changes to established habits. And it helps you to sort of, particularly for people, I think, who've tried to make changes before and have found that it might start well, but then it flounders. Very often, if you go back to, right, the thing that I really want to work on first may be cutting out snacking in the afternoon, or cutting out snacking in the evening, which isn't very enjoyable, but does leave me feeling sluggish, affects my sleep and affects my weight, for example. So if you're going to cut out evening snacking, to take a very, very common example of what people report as an unhelpful eating habit, you just target that, you just work on that. And the behaviour change wheel would help you look at whether you've got the opportunity to do that, or whether there are things making it difficult, like whether your partner is grazing their way through the evening, that might make it difficult. Whether you've got the capability, that means the sort of knowledge and the skills and the tools to do it, and whether you've got the motivation to do it. And this may sound like overly complicating it, but if you don't need to get complicated, then just look at the habit and start working on it. But if you get stuck, there is this there's a finer level of understanding which can really help you get unstuck. But the key is focus on one specific habit at a time, and when that feels as though it's become more second nature, then you can move on to the next one, so that you're creating a new set of habits and you're building one on top of the other, so that the progress that you make is sustained.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense, and that's great for any type of change. I mean,
it is.
The thing that, and this has actually also come from one of our viewers, weight maintenance gets harder as we get older, and this particular situation is where you've got a fitness trainer who is now 50 plus. They teach 17 classes a week, so they're exercising so regularly, but now it's a male. He's finding he's putting on weight.
Wow.
While still eating what he has been eating. So the only change is age for him, he feels. So how do we kind of change, I guess, our habits as we get older?
I think that is a really common experience, that you're not changing what you eat or how much you eat, but your weight is changing with age. And I think when that's happening, what it suggests is that maybe the energy requirements of your body are changing. Even, it's interesting that even for somebody as active as that, it's true. So if it's true for him, it's going to be true for most of us.
I know.
And so as your energy requirements change, what you might need to do is either adjust the balance of the foods that you're eating, in which case go to the British Dietetic Association's website and read about contents of food and nutrients, or if you're thinking more in terms of habit change, it might be that the quantities of food that you're used to eating are now not really what you need. So it might be that for somebody where their eating patterns might, on the surface of it, look extremely healthy, it might be that what's happening is that the meal size that their body has been used to may be bigger than the body now needs. So it may be that portion size, it might be something else, but it's distinctly possible that portion size is a candidate here. And then the task is to reduce portion size, again with the same approach of just focusing on that one habit of reducing your portion size at meal times, and I'd suggest you take it in steps so that you reduce maybe as much as a quarter, so that your new meal size is 3/4 of what you used to have. I certainly wouldn't go more than that in a step, but also that would be something that you wouldn't then reduce it down again. You just stay at that new meal size of 3/4 of your old size and see what happens to your weight.
That's really
and it
helpful.
It will be likely to go down because you're now eating less, unless you're compensating elsewhere. You're eating less, so it'll go down, but you don't know where that level will settle because that's up to your body, if you like. So you don't decide in advance, I want to lose half a stone, so I'll cut my meal size by 1/8 or 1/4. Doesn't work like that. It's you make the change and then your body adjusts, and then when your weight levels out, you can think, right, well, this is fine now. This is where I'm more comfortable. Or it might be that actually it still feels like you've got more change that you want to make, in which case you could then again adjust your portion size down again by a fraction, or look at a different any other eating habits.
Yeah, look at the content of the food. And actually, I think that will really be helpful for him, because I know what he's doing at the moment is almost trying to find the pattern by just logging his intake, and so he wants to know what he's doing, and then I think that's a really good next step. But that it's like an experiment, really. It's just checking back.
I'd really underline how useful it is to think about these as experiments, like mini experiments on your own eating patterns. And there isn't a right or wrong, but you do get you get results. You either get no effect, in which case you think, oh well, maybe I need to make a bit more of a change, or you know that it's just then information.
Yes, it is, and that's it. Information is sort of far less. I guess it comes with less guilt and worry and all of those things when it comes to when we're talking about weight. No, thank you. That's great. So you're staying with us, Dr. Helen, and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters Office Hours. We have got the fabulous Dr. Helen McCarthy with us. She is the appetite doctor, and she always takes a kind and sustainable approach to weight maintenance and weight loss, and it's always our pleasure to learn from you. So thank you, Helen. We've been talking about changes as we get older,
Yes.
and another change we always hear about is menopause weight gain. Now, this is putting you on the spot, and I completely respect your clinical credentials here, but is menopause weight gain real? And if so, what can we do to sort of help our metabolism along?
Well, I think, again, like everything, it's there'll be huge variation probably between individuals as to the way in which their menopause influences their weight and their metabolism. I think that the slightly complicating thing, obviously, is that menopause happens alongside age-related changes anyway. So you've got a bit of a double whammy there of hormonal changes alongside age-related changes. And I think the main thing to do is that either if the changes are, if it feels like it would be a manageable thing to look at your eating patterns and think, well, maybe my energy intake requirements now are a bit lower. So what I'm going to do is look at my current eating patterns and see whether maybe I could adjust or tweak my eating habits a little bit, one at a time. That might be really helpful for some people. For other people, I think it's really wise to seek professional help about what nutritionally they might need, and whether there's anything medical going on, whether they need medical intervention as well.
That is true. Medical intervention, this shouldn't be underestimated, actually,
No.
because so many things, as we've always said on this show, present in a certain way, and it could have completely different underlying cause. That's so important. This is a really cheeky personal question here. What's your favourite healthy snack, Dr. Helen?
Well, if I was having a healthy snack, the most likely things would either be a banana, if I wanted to keep going for a long time, because I find that bananas do keep me going for a long time. So if I needed a snack but had quite a long time to my next meal, it'd be a banana. If I didn't have very long to my next meal, what I know from experience is that cherry tomatoes, which I really like, a handful of those will keep me going, but not for very long. So I'll get hungry again soon. And it's that knowledge, or the discovering, is not, that won't be the same for everyone. And some people might not like those foods. But if you discover what foods keep you going for a couple of hours, banana, or what things might keep you going for half an hour, cherry tomatoes, then the choice of snack then is sort of, you've already discovered it, so you know what's going to suit you.
I love this, because this is all about really telling us to get more in touch with our bodies.
Yes.
Listen to ourselves, because we don't do that. And I know we've had previous conversations about this is how we struggle with weight, because we've just suppressed all the signals. So really helpful stuff.
It is, and it's really interesting as well. How about when we're recovering from an illness, so where we've been ill and not wanted to eat anything, and then we're recovering, and then we might just crave crisps or something else that's not particularly good for us?
Well, it might be that the craving element there might come from a sort of physical thing. It might be that there's some sort of physical urge to eat something. Maybe there's a reason to want something salty, or that it may be that, or it may be that the foods that we start craving are things more to do with comfort, that we associate with comfort, that we've learned to associate with comfort. So those might be the quite starchy foods. And I suppose my line on recovering from illness would be just to go easy on yourself, and maybe know that your appetite will return. It'll come back to how it normally is, but our appetite is very often quite significantly affected by illness, isn't it? Like even a sort of heavy cold might make it difficult to taste things, and so influence
Yes.
what you eat or how much you eat.
Yeah, again, being aware of our own bodies and
Yes.
giving it a chance, really.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yes.
Now, something which I've noticed recently, is the fashion industry. Now, I thought they were going in a really healthy direction because they had all of these Victoria's Secrets models being of a normal body size. Then suddenly, I think it was this year's Fashion Week or one of the runways, they suddenly had these tongue-in-cheek, admittedly, but much thinner models with "I love Ozempic" and things like that on them, and they really almost felt like they were making a statement. Are we still fighting these unrealistic ideals, or are there some healthy changes going on?
My hunch is that both things are true. That I think that there are people, perhaps mainly visible on social media, who are presenting really positive information, images, and modelling that are to do with diversity of body size and body shape, which is really helpful. But it hasn't sort of completely snuffed out the pursuit of thinness and the admiration of thinness. And I think it's concerning that people are using. It's concerning to me that people are using weight loss drugs when they are not.
Yes.
They're not overweight, whatever that means.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they may be trying to force their bodies into a lower appetite, lower food intake, but that seems to me to be a very unhelpful trend.
Exactly, and I think that leads me to my next question of how to separate thin from healthy. And actually beauty from healthy.
Yes.
Because there is this weird conception that this look is supposed to be ideal, and that's just stereotyping media and a lot of, I guess, male gaze influence sort of thing, the male gaze. But how do we separate that, and maybe even understanding that BMI isn't everything either?
I think it's really hard because I think these things are so sort of deeply rooted or have become deeply rooted in our views of beauty and even acceptability, unfortunately, so that I think it's very hard to shake them off. And I think that something that I think is helpful, one helpful tip I would suggest is that for anybody who's feeling down on themselves or feeling hopeless about changing weight, is if you're on social media, weed out, edit who you are following, and try and get rid of the people who are promoting a body size or a body shape that is not helpful to you, because it's just too different, or it's too, they're hyping too much of something that you just can't do. And there are some, there are great social media presences of people who are actually promoting really realistic and really positive portrayals of different body size, different body shape, different weight, and getting away from what is actually really tyrannical. If your genes mean that you aren't ever going to be that sort of waif-like shape.
Tyrannical is the word. I love that, because that really can feel so oppressive, especially different cultures as well. There's certain shapes which just aren't going to work, and yes. I think that is so important. So do you have any top tips for us for when we have an irregular eating schedule, just whether it's probably for maintenance, weight maintenance on that irregular schedule, please?
I think the main the main tips I would really sort of reinforce are just be realistic about the demands on you and on how regular your eating routines can be. Prioritize your own sort of making life manageable rather than putting yourself under pressure, because the more pressure you put yourself under, the more likely it is that that's just going to cave after a while, because we just can't function under too much pressure. And we revert to our old patterns if we do that. And use planning. Planning, I think, is something just forward thinking, not meticulous planning, just thinking, I know that on such and such a day, I'm not going to have any chance to eat between this time and that time. So maybe have a snack with me that I can just have in a short break. Or, for instance, something like, if I know that there's going to be a time when I'm going to arrive home really hungry, try and make sure that there's something that's really quick and really easy to prepare, in shove in the microwave would be the ideal, probably. That you can eat when you come in the door. Because if you are trying to eat healthily and think you are trying to cook from scratch, then it may be that you're microwaving a meal that you did cook from scratch last week, but it might be microwaving something that is somebody else has prepared, or that you've bought from a shop, or that it's just making things so that you're trying to work with what your body needs and what your mind needs, rather than trying to fit yourself into something.
I love that. I love that. And it is remembering your body needs the nutrients and your mind needs it now.
Yes.
And it's understanding that. I love it. I love it.
It's
Brilliant.
trying to match the two up, isn't
you're
it?
amazing.
Great tips. Thank you. And for viewers who may not have met you before, and if you haven't met Dr. Helen before, please go back and find our other shows with Dr. Helen in them. They're brilliant. Where can we find out more about you?
If you go to my website, which is the appetitedoctor.co.uk, there's loads of information on there. Brilliant. I've got a YouTube channel, which is also the Appetite Doctor. And on my website, there's a section with blog articles on it, and there are loads of articles. And it's all the information on there is about the psychology of eating and appetite and weight loss, because there's a lot of information that can really help us to regulate our own eating that doesn't always get centre stage, because I think that the focus is usually, understandably, on eating what we eat and eating healthily, but how we eat has a massive impact on our overall health, well-being, and our ability to just regulate our own weight.
Oh my goodness. Helen, as always, it's been such an enlightening show. Thank you so much. You will join us again, won't you?
I will. Yeah, no, it's a real pleasure. So much fun.
It's always our pleasure. Thank you so much, Dr. Helen, and we will be back just after Business Boost. In this week's Business Boost, I wanted to give some tips that Dr. Helen has actually given on previous shows, and it's just a reminder to reinforce some of those brilliant tips and tools. If you are trying to change habits, it's very helpful to have a replacement habit. So it's not a case of simply, I'm no longer going to snack in front of the telly, because you're going to want something to do with your hands. So maybe you want to try, if you like, knitting or crochet, or I bought an adult colouring book, so I will sit there and I will colour things in whilst I'm watching television, which stops me being on my phone, but it also stops me wanting to snack. It's not a case of just going cold turkey. It's not a case of just going, I'm going to give something up, because we are already in certain habits and certain behaviours. And if we suddenly stop doing that thing, whatever it might be, we might last a couple of days, but then we begin to resent it. We begin to feel fidgety and really want to have that food or whatever it was we've given up, and we might just go straight back to square one. So one of the important things to remember is, if you are giving up certain habits, try and have an enjoyable replacement, enjoyable and healthy. Last part of the show.
Yes.
One of my favourite. Love Dr. Helen.
She's so informative.
Yes.
And I think she says, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I could do that.
Yeah, it's easy to apply. All of the tools are easy to apply. But I just love the importance of remembering our brain and our bodies don't always sit in alignment with each other. So
Absolutely.
I really get that the body needs certain nutrients, but the brain or my mind is going, just eat the cake, just eat it. And she understands that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so important. What do you take from today?
That there's so much more psychology in food and eating than you might think.
Yes.
You're right. You know, you might think, I haven't really had many vegetables in the last 2 days. I better have some vegetables. But I really just want a jacket potato and cheese. So, you know, there's that dichotomy.
Yeah.
But also, you can make significant changes by making small changes. So what I mean by that is you can make a small change and it can have a significant impact if you keep up with that small change.
Yes.
So everything's doable.
Yes.
That's what I kind of taken away.
Yeah. I also like the listening to your body. So I like the way she talked about having a banana that suits her for a longer term thing, and then cherry tomatoes is a short term thing. And when she was saying that, I remember thinking, I don't know what my body thinks. I don't know what keeps me going for longer and what keeps me going for shorter. So I think that is important as well.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's fascinating. It's teaching us all to listen to ourselves a bit more, because really I suppose our body knows what it needs. And the other thing that was interesting, which is probably kind of sad and frustrating as well, is the whole thing about age.
I know.
And that's something we can't do anything about.
I find it intensely irritating that we get older.
Yes, and then all
really
those changes happen.
Yes.
And all the things that we could cope with when we were 10 years younger, suddenly the body's going, no.
Exactly.
Not anymore. But yet, psychologically, our habits want to remain the same.
Yes, exactly. And that's a really good point. When you said about your friend who's a PT, that's just incredible. If somebody who's working out 17 times a week is putting weight on, my initial thought was, well, what chance have we got? But actually, Dr. Helen then explained why. And then you just think, yeah, it can happen to anyone because everyone gets older.
Yes.
Everybody's metabolism slows down. So, don't lose hope just because a PT is putting weight on. It doesn't mean to say that we can't lose weight.
Exactly. And it is about experimentation.
Yeah.
So thank you, as always, for listening. And from Jude and I, have a healthy week.